I'm really thrilled for our next panel, which is on empowering regenerative practices through the protection of our farmland. We have a wonderful group of experts, so I'm going to introduce them all, and they'll all come up on stage, and you can clap as you see fit, but you should clap for all of them. Klaas Martens, a farmer and co-owner of Lakeview Organic Grain, and Klaas and Mary-Howell Martens Farm. Round of applause for Klaas. Josh Morgenthau, the owner and operator at Fishkill Farms. Round of applause. Mary Claire Whelan, a farm manager at Massaro Community Farm. Round of applause. And Dr. Beth Sauerhaft, Vice President of Programs at American Farmland Trust. Round of applause for her. I'm so thrilled to be sharing the stage with all of these folks. And I want to take a moment while they're getting settled and getting arranged to thank some of our in-kind partners, including Arrow Farms, Appeal, Aturea, Beans' How, Bonterra Wine, Bowery Farming, Brooklyn Brewery, Certified Origins, Flora Food Group, Farmer's Fridge, and Gotham Greens. Round of applause, everyone. I make you clap a lot because it keeps the energy up, right? And I can't see all of you, so it reminds me like there's a lot of people here. So, Beth, I'm hoping I can start with you. We've been talking about this. I want to start by talking about the incentives that are needed for regenerative farming practices. Can you talk about what the research is showing? What are you seeing?
Sure, thanks, Danny. So American Farmland Trust has carried out research looking at the impacts of the Farm and Ranch Land Protection Program, which started in the mid-90s. And that was a federal matching program where funds were provided to state and local governments and tribes and land trusts to help them work with landowners to protect their farms, put conservation easements on them. And so what we've seen is that, of course, there's the benefit of these programs that they are keeping land in agriculture. So when you protect land, of course, it stays in agricultural land so you can keep farming it for the duration. In addition, we're seeing that it's helping other farmers access land because it impacts the cost of the land. Mm-hmm. And we're also seeing that it really has encouraged a lot of adoption of conservation practices, some of what John was talking about a little bit earlier. So we have seen that in surveys that we've done of these farmers who own FRPP protected lands, 62% of them have a conservation plan on that farm. Mm-hmm. 93% of them have at least one conservation practice. 86% have at least two conservation practices, and then 78% have at least three conservation practices. And this is higher than the normal average of across all farmers. And so these are things like conservation tillage, where you're not turning over the soil in between each cropping season, or you're using a nutrient management plan, or you're putting in riparian buffers, things that are really helping to build the soil health and to build wildlife habitat, and there's other environmental co-benefits. In addition, what's pretty cool is we're seeing that 81% of first-generation protected landowners and 72% of second-generation landowners of protected lands have definitely said that having protected land status has really encouraged the adoption of conservation practices.
Common sense, right?
It really is. And a really cool little factoid is in the Midwest, the bread basket, the corn belt of this country, on average, for every 1 ton of corn that is harvested, we are losing 2 tons of topsoil. That's nutrients and soil health, that's sequestered carbon going down the rivers.
And where's that corn going, Beth? We have to talk about that for a second. It's going to ethanol and to livestock for the most part.
Yes, and yes.
So it's not food for humans. I just want to make that clear.
Right. It's going for things that we're all consuming, definitely. Yeah. And I think, so having thrown out a few of those statistics, I think it's interesting, we've got 3 farmers up here who have land that is protected or soon to be protected, and it'd be really great to hear, like Mary Claire, how do you respond to some of those facts that I threw out there? Because you guys are living this.
Yeah, thanks, Beth, and thanks for having me today. I think, the statistics that you explained make perfect sense to me. So I'm a first-generation farmer, and before I was the manager at Massaro Community Farm on Wappinger and Pawgusset land in Woodbridge, Connecticut, I was the coordinator of the New Connecticut Farmer Alliance. And so through that job, I got to know so many of the producers in our state, working from, quarter-acre plots in their backyards to some of the biggest dairy farms that we have in the state. And really what hit home for me through that work and through farmers just being my community, and what's really true for myself, is that I'm not like farming because I grew up on a farm, or I wanted to farm, and then climate work is something that I'm like doing on the side or need to be incentivized to do. I want to wake up every morning and go outside and put my hands on the soil and do something that is directly making an impact on climate mitigation and is working to build more resilient, more thriving local communities. And farming is just the best way that I found to do that. And I think that's true for a lot of the farmers in my generation who are getting into this work because we see the climate crisis around us. We feel it, and we want to do something about it. But that work, that climate mitigation work, the sort of investment that you have to make in building soil health, in, planting perennial crops that don't just, stay easily there after one season. I'm out there pulling mugwort every single year, multiple times a year. Like, I have to know that I'm going to be able to farm that land in the long term. And I have to know that the next generation is going to be able to farm that land. Otherwise, the effort and the money required just doesn't really add up. And, in my work with the Farmers Alliance, I've had friends who had to pick up and move their farms 2 or 3 times, pack up their high tunnels, pack up their greenhouses, and move shop because they just don't have that stable access to land. And it's really heartbreaking, and it means that you have to start all over again. Like, I've been farming for a decade, which sounds like a really long time, but that means I've only done this 10 times. It's like every year there's something new to learn. Every year you get better at farming and at doing climate smart farming because you learn how the land responds in a flood. You learn how the land responds in a drought. And so when we lose farmland, when we lose farmers, we're just losing all this like climate knowledge from that particular parcel of land that really takes generations and decades to build up. So
I love that you're using climate as your advocacy tool, right? To be a farmer. It's so great. Josh, I'm wondering, when we last spoke, you didn't study agriculture, and unfortunately, and I'm so sorry, your parents passed away, and you were put in this position of taking over the farm and protecting it for those future generations. Can you share a little bit about that journey? It's really difficult.
Yeah, and I think I can also kind of attest to the impact of and the importance of protecting land for instance, a third-generation farmer such as myself, for similar reasons, but in a different context. We protected our farm farm's a 270-acre apple orchard, fruit and vegetable farm in the Hudson Valley. Do pick your own, have a CSA, very diverse production, split organic and eco certified fruit production. And we protected the land in 2012. And it was after a period where the farm had really struggled for a long time. My father was really committed to keeping it going, but his career was not on the farm.
Sure.
And we needed new tractors, and the orchard needed to be replanted and, desperately pruned. And so we actually had a need to raise capital to fund the equipment that we needed to actually get the farm kind of moving again and set it up for a new leg of growth and success. And that was the context. And then on top of that, in 2009, we had and I know I didn't get to share this with Klaas, but I know he has had a similar thing. We had a barn fire and lost almost all of our equipment and our cold storage and structure. And so we were really in dire straits.
Sure.
And, the the importance for me of protecting the land was that the farm was originally over 1,000 acres when my grandfather started it. And I had seen my aunt's piece go fallow, and I'd seen my uncle's piece get sold for development, and land that I had grown up exploring on and really had felt attachment to had, turned into housing development. And so that was the context. And then we also needed money to actually keep the farm going.
Yeah.
And the state, the Purchase of Development Rights program was, a solution that enabled us to invest for the future. And the, to second Mary Claire's point about the just the how much investment regenerative farming takes.
Right.
In our orchard, for instance, we, instead of using herbicide strips as a matter of course, we do a lot of mulching. We actually have tree companies that chip the wood, tree branches from the local town roads, and they dump wood chips on our farm, and we spread those under the trees. That to get that program started, we needed a row mulcher. It's a lot of labor to spread the wood chips, way cheaper to just spray herbicide. And you don't see the payoff immediately,
Right.
but over time, in the last 4 years, 2 of the last 4 summers, we've had extreme droughts, 2 years ago and 3 years ago. And we had blocks that, we were really struggling to irrigate the farm. And because of the wood chip mulching and the organic matter that we'd built up in the soil over many years, our trees, there was no stress. And we were actually amazed
Exactly.
that there were other orchards were panicking because they didn't have enough water, and our trees were happy.
Stability, investment, being able to have that long-term vision and have folks help you. When a barn burns down, things like that, it's a community effort. Klaas, I want to turn to you because I think one of the reasons that farmland is often, goes into development is because farmers don't have a succession plan. They don't have a plan in place. And I'm hoping you can talk about, as someone who's been doing this a long time, what that succession plan looks like and why it's important to you to have that sort of built into your farming plan.
I'm probably somewhat unusual in that my son wants to take over the farm. We're actually at a point where there's a generational transfer taking place, and especially in the Hudson Valley. The original families that farmed that land when I was growing up are not farming it anymore. But there is a whole new group of farmers who want to become farmers, and it's such a hurdle to have to come up with millions of dollars of investment. So on our farm, like I said, my son is taking over, but I'm very proud of something else. We've taken on some young farmers and helped launch them. And we hope within the next 2 months we will be closing with a young couple that don't have any farm background, have no assets. He walked out of a Walgreens one day and said, "This is not my career."
I love it. I love it.
And Zach and Hannah are really great dairy farmers. And they are going to be able to do this because we've created a system where they cooperate with other farmers, where they don't have to have this enormous investment and where they can specialize in what they're good at. But if we don't put young people on the land and help them gain that knowledge, all farming is local. There's such a connection between a farmer and their land. I need to quote one of our neighbors. We are fortunate to live in an old order Mennonite community, which are very similar to Amish. And what he said was, "I can afford to lose the soil that's going down my streams, but my grandchildren can't." And that's a really different way. That's a very different way of looking at land and looking at a farm, because he's looking at it as a legacy that our future generations are going to farm. If we just look at it as an investment that we're trying to get as much money as we can out of, that's why we see 2 tons of soil being lost for every ton of corn, because this is a business proposition and investment. It's a very different thing than this is the home for our future generations.
all three of you have mentioned future generations, and I feel like you as farmers have such a responsibility. You're stewards of the land, you're business people, you're innovators and entrepreneurs. How do you handle these multiple responsibilities and burdens while also protecting your farmland? Mary Claire?
Well, it's exhausting. I mean, for me, it's like it's the relationships, and that's what I focus on first and foremost. There's the relationship that I have with the land. There's how much the land and the plants and the animals teach me every single year. It's incredible. This year we have these herons that have taken up residence on our farm, and they're so beautiful, and I just feel like I'm learning about water and ecosystems from them. And then there's the people who work on the farm as well. And I think that when we talk about stability and we talk about investing in and supporting the next generation of farmers, we really also have to be talking about farm workers. Because if you're a young person interested in farming, what's the best way to learn? You go and work on a farm. But if you're working on a farm, you probably don't have healthcare, you don't have retirement savings, you're probably getting paid really poorly. None of us qualify for overtime. There's just no world where you can be working for that pay on a farm and also saving up the money that you need to start your own business. And so we're losing really skilled, really wise farm workers because you do this for 10 years and it's like, my body's exhausted, I'm broke, like, what am I supposed to do from here? I have all these skills, but, you know, people just go into other industries. And so I think you know, the farmland affordability is a huge, huge piece of it, but it's also just a matter of like wages and benefits for farm workers because these are the people who have that knowledge, and I think that's so important.
Absolutely, removing, you know, the student loan debt, from, encouraging people to have health insurance, like all of these things are really needed. Josh, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. You know, you have such a strong burden, but you also have a great, you know, energy of protecting farmland.
I mean, I think Mary Claire, it's hard to add to what she said. For me, I don't have the benefit of lots of siblings who are involved. I am one of seven siblings, and the only one who really was interested in the farm, which is a blessing and a curse because I don't have the help, but I also don't. I don't have to be business partners with siblings,
Siblings
which
are
would be its own set of challenges. But it's, I mean, for me, it's echoing Mary Claire. It's having a good team. So I didn't have the large family network to, you know, help me run this operation. So I had to find that through hiring the right people.
Yeah, and that community that you've built, that's wonderful. Klaas?
Our neighbors are what make our farm more successful and more resilient. And we talk a lot about productivity in American agriculture, but we don't talk about resilience enough. And it's not the same thing. We had a catastrophic fire in 2017. It burned down $1 million building. And that night, 200 of our neighbors were there. And the next morning, one of them said, "We've got this, you've got work to do." And we had a new barn standing a month later. Now that's that's resilience. But there's a different kind of resilience, and I've only got a minute left, but climate is changing. When I graduated from high school, the farming that was done at the Mason-Dixon line is what we are doing today in New York. And we're in upstate New York. That is a massive change. Our season now is at about 6 weeks longer than it was. Now that is causing stress on plants. It has closed windows for some of the crops that were grown traditionally, has created other opportunities. But we need to be able to adapt. Biodiversity is our real crop insurance. And I really have a problem with our government cropping subsidies and program because we're using insurance to enable what I consider risky behavior on the land. And we really should be encouraging adaptation. We've got lots of opportunities now, even as far north as we are, for double cropping. We've got new crops that fit, and it's this biodiversity is what is making our farm stronger and more stable. And that's what's going to make the next generation able to farm here in the future.
Biodiversity is our crop insurance. That's the quote of the day. Thank you all so much. Please give the panel a round of applause.